wide range from people who basically got garden lives to people who are just beginning. And the nice thing about gardening, that's okay because it all kind of works out. You don't have to know a lot if you want to know stuff. Right now, I'm on 11 acres, and everybody else moves when they get tired of their houses. We've always moved when the yard got full. And that's just kind of the way it is, you know. Okay, honey, it's time to move. I don't have room to plant anything else. So on 11 acres, it looks like it's going to keep me for a while. My husband has said we will not be moving. I am a retired educator, 37 years as an educator. I am now a farmer. I wanted to be a farmer all my life. My father did not think that was a suitable profession for a woman. He said I could be a nurse or a teacher, so I was a teacher. But now I'm farming, and I just took my first pig to the butcher, and that did not tear me up. Oh. And I have 4 sheep who are going to have lambs. The ewes are going to have lambs in about 3 weeks. I've got bred heifer cows coming in April, and chickens and guineas and some turkeys that we raise from poults. So on my 11 acres, everywhere you look, there's something growing. Now, when we moved 3 pickup loads of plants. So basically, there's plants everywhere. And let me tell you a little bit about the edible landscaping, then we'll talk about how that applies to what you're doing here. And those of you who are doing raised bed gardening and square foot gardening, I've always gardened in raised beds. Before we moved to this 11 acres, what I wanted to show people, and other people have open houses, I have open yards, is that living on a typical suburban lot, you can grow enough food for a family of 4 using raised beds and edible landscaping. Now, you can't grow meat very likely unless you've got some chickens or something like that, but basically your fruits and vegetables you can grow on just a lot. It doesn't have to be a garden. You can do it in your backyard. If you're willing to give some of your front yard, you can get any more. But the point of it is you don't have to have this special place to do gardening. And I've been doing that since the early 80s. Now, edible landscaping is not new. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were some of the first examples of edible landscaping. There were notes from the 10th century that Benedictine monks showed illustrations of herbs planted around rose beds. Mm-hmm. I mean, people have been doing that for years, but it didn't really catch on in the United States until the early 80s. And this lady is kind of the guru of edible landscaping, Rosalind Creasy. She had a book in 1982 called Edible Landscaping. This is the new edition. They had this at the Greenwood Library. Kendra checked when we came in. This, if you want to do edible landscaping, is absolutely essential. If you just like gardening, it's worth it for the pictures, but it's written in really, really simple ways, and the back of it has a whole bunch of vegetables, how they can be used in edible landscaping, how they're, like, oh, here we are, you know, you have to look at the zones, and I won't go into zones, because if you're beginning, all I can tell you is if you buy something, if you buy a plant, say, is it hardy in zone 5? That's all you have to say. If they say no, don't buy it. It's that simple. 5. It's kind of like the American Idol. 5, 5, 5, you know. Just ask. But anyway, the point of it is it tells you the zones, and it tells you what to do and how to grow them, and how they're used in the kitchen, and how they can be used in the landscape, and what kind of soil they need. I mean, it's really, really self-explanatory. So if you're just going to get one book about edible landscaping, that would be my recommendation. So in the early 80s, after I read Rosalind Creasy's book, I started thinking, how does that apply? Now, before we go any further, let me explain. Edible landscaping is a philosophy. There's no rules to it. It's how you think. So you're thinking, okay, I want to grow something. Okay. Well, if you're going to grow something and go to all the trouble of digging the hole and making sure the sun's right and making sure it gets watered and fertilized or whatever, well, think in terms of it's producing food. Now, I had to expand my philosophy because I wanted to cheat too much. And I expanded not just food for people, but if it can't do food for people, let it be food for livestock, or food for wildlife, or food for birds, or food for bees. I mean, let it do something useful. Now, is there beauty in something that just is there because it's beautiful? Yes. I'm not putting down a tree that's just there because it's beautiful. It does the oxygen thing and all that good stuff. But the point of it is, most plants, well, not most plants, but many plants can serve a variety of uses. So if you're going to do it, choose something that's going to be useful to you. Right now, edible landscaping is really big. And let me throw some terms at you that all kind of goes together, and you'll recognize all this. Right now, there's a huge back to nature move. People are looking around and saying, you know, God, I don't even know what I'm eating in the grocery store. If you read the packages, it will scare you to death. There's a list of preservatives that long. And we've been doing that most of our lives and not thought a whole lot about it. But now suddenly you're thinking, I don't know if I really want to do that. I mean, I raised this pig without any antibiotics, without any growth hormones. He was raised on pasture, digging like pigs are due, which is a bad mess. I mean, we brought in topsoil to fill up the holes. But the point of it is, he lived like pigs are supposed to live. And he didn't get anything but just natural food. And he was one good-looking pig. Well, I'm going to eat those pork chops knowing what's in those pork chops. And there's a satisfaction in that. Well, you can do the same thing with your green stuff. You can know what's there. You can choose whether you're going to put sprays on it. You can choose if you're going to fertilize with compost or if you're going to buy fertilizer. There's no right or wrong to it, but now you have a choice. And it's and people are exercising that choice. The locavores, locavores are just eating food that's locally grown. And that's really important because it doesn't have to be shipped in. You might hate asparagus. If you've gotten stuff in the cans and it's mushy,
slick.
Slick, and you're thinking, why would anybody think this is gourmet? Well, you go cut it from your asparagus patch and bring it in and steam it and put some butter or lemon or hollandaise on it, and you think, oh my gosh, I'm diving into heaven. Do you know how hard it is to grow an asparagus plant? Roughly like growing a dandelion. I mean, seriously, there's this weird little root that looks kind of like a spider, and you dig a hole and you put it in the ground and you cover it up. Now you can do it harder. Now let me tell you one thing right now. Let's get this straight. I am the world's laziest gardener. So I will be telling you not the best way to do it, but a way that will work and will be very easy. So no, if you read the book about asparagus, it's doing the trench and filling it in a little time and all that. But you can't just dig a hole and stick it in. And you can go and get a dozen asparagus plants and put them in a row, and it will be a hedge, and they'll grow the first year, and you're not supposed to come the first year because you want that energy to go down the roots. And you've got this filmy, firmy hedge that you can cut every year after that, and it'll give you all this asparagus you can use. Unless you're just like an asparagus fiend. And it'll live for 50 years. Now, an investment for that $13.99 that you spent on your thing, and it'll live for 50 years. Now, you got to figure out how to keep the weeds out of it and that kind of stuff, and that's where I grow my asparagus and raise beds. They'll tell you can't do that. Well, I've been doing it for now nearly 20 years, and somehow I get asparagus. And so I don't have to cope with weeds, lazy garden. That's how edible landscaping happens. It happens when you decide you want to eat something that you grew yourself, and you want to put it somewhere that's convenient for you. I've got an herb garden right outside my kitchen door. Why? Because I'm too darn lazy to go to the backyard if I want chives on my baked potato. Are there other plants there? Yeah, there's a bleeding heart, and there's a clematis, and there's some flowers, and there's chives, because that's where I want my chives. So we're not talking about rocket science here. We're talking about making a decision of how you want your yard to be and how convenient you want it. Okay, we're talking more about concepts. I like to think of my yard as an extension of my house. Okay, out my front window, what do I want to look at? because that's kind of an extension of that living room. Because when I'm standing there, I'm looking out and I'm looking at trees and shrubs and whatever. Well, if I'm looking at a tree, why not look at a North Star cherry? A North Star cherry is a sour cherry. It gets maybe 7 or 8 foot tall. It is beautiful 3 seasons of the year, and not bad in the winter because it's got kind of rusty colored bark, beautiful white blooms, red cherries. The birds might get them, but hey, somebody's happy. You know, if you beat them to them, you can make cherry preserves. And so I just did edible landscaping, because when I want to look out that window, I've got a North Star cherry. That's how you think in terms of edible landscaping. You go home tonight and you look out your window and you think, what do I want to see? And what do I want to eat? And then you kind of put the two things together. Not complicated. Don't overdo. Now, I say that, and you talked about your obsession with plants. It becomes an addiction really fast. I mean, I'm a 37-year gardener and an advanced master gardener, and you put something on sale for 75% off, and I will buy it. I will buy it even if I know that there's not a rationale in the world. My husband no longer says, where are you going to put it? Now he says, how many things do we have to move to put it where you want it? That's not necessarily good. But the point of it is, that's kind of what happens. Now, are there downsides to edible landscaping? Yeah, there sure are. And let me tell you, when you get these great ideas. I had roses. Wow, there's all that clear ground under the roses. I'll put strawberries there. You know, you can't really, this is before the days of knockout roses, and you really can't grow hybrid teas without spraying them. And once you sprayed them, that pretty much shoots those strawberries. Dumb idea. Not the dumbest thing I've ever done by any means, but a dumb idea. So you got to kind of think ahead. Now, in my present location, most of my fruit trees are spread out just like you'd plant a maple or an oak or something like that. I've got fruit trees. I've got dwarf fruit trees because I'm lazy and don't want to have to do anything more than I can reach. But there are certain dwarf fruit trees that I would not recommend you start with because they require a little more protection. The peaches and the nectarines and the sweet cherries. So I've got them on the south side of my house in a kind of protected thing. And the ground underneath is pretty bare. Well, do you know what loves to live under there as a ground cover? Melons. That hot sun, cantaloupes, watermelons, had great ones. Call it a ground cover. So now my little orchard has pretty green things underneath of it, because I had it mulched, which is, we'll talk about mulch in a minute. Then I decided I'd put a little rail fence kind of thing. Well, if I'm going to have a rail fence, it can't just sit there. So what do I want to grow on it? Doggone, I'm going to put a seedless grape on that. Because how convenient when I'm walking out to the backyard to pass a seedless grape. You know how hard it is to plant grapes? You dig a hole, you put the grape vine in it, and that's pretty much that. Now, you can make it complicated. Understand, you can make it complicated, but you don't have to make it complicated. Right now, I'm not using sprays. It's just a wild hair. I'm sure I'm going to have apples with wormholes in them, but they're going to be nice, healthy apples. Right now, I'm not using sprays. We'll see what happens. So anyway, I've got my seedless grapevine. Okay, well, I want something pretty, though. What can I put that's pretty? You know what you can put that's pretty? You can put antique roses that don't have to be sprayed and have rose hips that are that big, and you can use it to make rose hip jelly, which is high in vitamin C. Okay, now I've got pretty, and I've got practical, and I've got easy. Because nothing I just talked about has to be, I'm not spraying my fruit trees. We'll see what happens. What's the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen is that the fruit will be ugly. Oh darn. But I bet it tastes better. Those of you who have your one tomato plant, after you eat your tomatoes from your tomato plant, can you go to the grocery and enjoy them anymore? No, can't do it. When I talked about raised beds, and Marion, you're talking about wanting to start a garden, it's hard not to do it in raised beds if you don't want to work hard. And we're not here to talk about raised beds, but let me kind of interject this because several of you are thinking about starting gardening. I do raised beds by getting non-treated lumber that's 10 inches high. It's 10 by 2. You get 3 10 by 2 by 8s. That's an 8 foot long, 10 feet wide, 2 foot deep, and you cut one of them in two so that your raised bed is 4 by 8. You make it 4 by 8 because you could reach it from either side. You never walk in your bed. Unless you have a good source of, unless you want to dig a lot, which I never want to dig a lot. I buy loads of dirt, not fancy dirt, not mulch, not pretty stuff, dirt, and put it in the raised beds. And one load of dirt will fill a couple of raised beds. So what you now have is a virtual, you can grow, in a raised bed, you can grow enough beans for a family of 4. You can grow half a dozen tomatoes. If you want to do succession planting, like right now I've got peas in a raised bed. When I finish with the peas, I'll put beans. I've got my early lettuce, I've got radishes, I've got onions in a raised bed. So basically, a couple of raised beds will get you started for those of you who want to just get started easy. And right now, as long as with untreated lumber, you haven't really invested maybe $50 in your raised bed, and it's there pretty much indefinitely. So those of you who are beginning gardeners, I'd say start with raised beds. It's not exactly edible landscaping, but it will lead to edible landscaping. Because once you're successful in your raised bed, then you're going to start looking at your yard and thinking, okay, what else can I put and where can I put it? Another downside is you kind of make sure that when you're sticking things places, everything there needs about the same care. I really like blueberries. Never had a lot of luck with blueberries, but I really like them. Well, I'm not going to stick blueberries here and there because they need an acid soil. And I'm not going to run around with soil acidifier here, there, and yonder. So I made a hedge out of the blueberries, and they're all in the same area. Still edible landscaping, but edible landscaping that suits me and my style of doing things, which is doing it the easiest way possible. On an archway, I've got hardy kiwis growing on an archway. Now, understand, we've only lived here, this is going to be the second summer for things, so nothing is bearing yet. By next year, I ought to start seeing things. The fruit trees are going to bloom, some of them this year, but I doubt if they'll have much in the way of fruit. But anyway, I've got hardy kiwis. I needed some accent plants on that entryway, so I used horseradish. Now, you don't think about horseradish, period, probably. But it actually makes a kind of a neat-looking plant. Now, there's all kinds of be carefuls with horseradish, because apparently if you cut those roots and you grind them up your kitchen, you end up crying bitter tears because it burns you so bad. I haven't gotten to that part yet. But anyway, that horseradish looked really kind of cool. And then I had a tomato plant there as part of the entryway because that seemed like a good idea. You can't stick tomatoes just anywhere. You'd think you could. But tomatoes can be fussy. Now, cherry tomatoes are like weeds. You can stick those anywhere, and they will come up by themselves again year after year. Apparently, the people who had the house before we did tossed out their cherry tomatoes, and we had a volunteer cherry tomato plant that produced enough for all of us, and I just let it, it'll probably produce again this year. But anyway, but regular tomatoes, they need a lot of sun and they need a lot of air circulation. So you can't really stick them in as dense of place as you can something else. Just recently, it's when spring comes, you want to see some color. So I bought the requisite little 4-square pansies and put 2 of those pansies in a big pot outside my bedroom window because I wanted to look at them first thing in the morning. Well, the pot looked bare. So I stuck a couple of pieces of bib lettuce in there. Doggone, I just did edible landscaping. I did edible landscaping because the pot was bare and the pansies looked pretty. And now the lettuce looks even prettier there. Now, that won't give me enough lettuce for a major salad, but it will give me enough to put on the plate to go under my cottage cheese and pear that I want to put on it. Now, the rest of the lettuce is out in the raised bed. So what I'm trying to say is edible landscaping, there are no rules. you make your own rules by simply choosing what you want it to be. One of the things, there's a whole lot of, one of the things I'm really experimenting on that I'm excited about are some of the lesser used trees. Like I've got a medlar, and I've got a medlar because when I read the Agatha Christie books about Hercule Poirot, he was always doing medlars. I didn't know what a medlar was. Well, they have great blooms on them, and you let them, I can't remember, there's a funny name for waiting for them to get ripe. But then I've got a quince because I tasted pineapple quince jelly one time, so I'm growing a pineapple quince. I've got a fruiting crabapple. Now all crabapples fruit, but some of them fruit with pretty good sized crabapples. The dolgo, which is what I'm growing, have beautiful, I mean, you talk about a tree for all seasons. Beautiful big red fruits on it. And they make the most gorgeous jelly. I've made crabapple jelly forever. And really it has kind of almost the color of her sweater, this deep, pretty color. And again, I mean, it blooms beautiful in the spring, looks decent in the winter, has beautiful fruit on it, fall color, not great fall color, but you know, okay. And you just did edible landscaping.
What'd you call that name again?
It's D-O-L-G-O, Dolgo. And they'll also that's the other thing. Okay, another downside. I mean, at least I'm, giving you both. Some things have to have a boy and a girl to make babies. So if you're going to do apples, you're going to have to check and see what other apples pollinate them. And those crab apples, the Whitney and Dolgo, will also pollinate apples. So they do have a purpose there. Now we've got bees, and we had to break up some ground and had to figure out what to do with the ground. Well, I chose to plant white Dutch clover. A lot of people don't like clover. I like clover a lot. Bees like it even more. So again, if I'm not doing this because I hate lawns. Now, I'm not a big fan of lawns because they have to be mowed. That's maintenance. It gets away from the lazy part. So I'm encroaching on our yard. And that clover won't have to be mowed. It stays low. Our back, what's down the sheep pasture, or part of the sheep pasture, turned out to be a septic field. And I'm reading, and Purdue says, oh my gosh, you can't compress a septic field, which means you can't grow most things on it, and you shouldn't be mowing it, all this kind of stuff. Well, now I'm trying to put a meadow there that has wildflowers that the bees can use. So and Purdue has this whole list of things that you can use over a septic field. So that's an experiment. It may work, it may not work. That's back to this obsession of, okay, once you get started on this, then everything you do, so you start thinking, filtering it through this thing is, okay, will it fit into this overall plan where everything kind of coordinates with everything else? So I'm protecting the septic field, I'm eliminating mowing there, and I'm providing particular flowers that the bees are going to like. So you see, it's a really nice, healthy interaction of things, and you tend to feel good about it. Back to the lazy part again. There are three secrets, or there's two secrets for a lazy person's garden. One is choice of plants. I'm pretty much not adding much of anything that's not a native plant. Because if it's already living here, it's probably not going to have to be sprayed. Nothing ever has to be pruned. You prune it either for your convenience or because it's going to make the plant healthier. But if you never pruned at all, it wouldn't be, the earth wouldn't stand still. But you don't have your diseases and your insect problems. And you can get on the internet and get list and list and list of all kinds of plants that are native plants.
I tried to look that up one time. I had a hard time. Did you know any signs?
The one I always go for is INPAWS, I-N-P-A-W-S. And they and what I go, Google's my answer to everything. I go to Google and put out native plants for Indiana. And, that'll help. But INPAWS is, I don't even know what the...
Indiana Native Plant and Wildlife
Society.
Okay, the new character, no. But anyway, so they have some really good lists, and they have a couple of books and things like that. But yeah, I usually carry around a list of them because I'm always checking. Because my latest passion is native grasses, and if you start thinking grass looks good, you really are hurting. But anyhow, and there's just a world of and some of the prairie grasses I'm using the meta. That's not going to be bee stuff. I've got I'm back. See, I'm jumping around. Sorry. Back to the easy stuff. Choice of plants is one of your keys to success and to low maintenance. The other is mulching. Now, horas, if you're talking about mulching where you've got this big pile of thing going up against a tree trunk, that's not mulching. That's idiocy. Mulching is putting something around your plants so that weeds won't grow and it holds moisture in. Now, we buy mulch because we don't have a way to produce it. If you use leaves for mulch, they need to be oak leaves or something that doesn't mat down. But, bagged mulch is fine if you don't have a big space. If you've got a big space, you're going to need a pickup load of stuff. But we mulch everything. And if up to this point, we also trenched, which means you dig around your garden about 6 inches deep, fill that with mulch, and that way you don't have to trim either, because trimming is evil. You don't want to trim. So if you trench, but you got to have to strong back, and good shovel skills. I'm willing to shovel to plant things. I'm no longer willing to shovel to trench. But back when I was, trenching was a wonderful way to keep from ever having to trim. Because your mower can run right over it, right up at the edges.